Hello and welcome to another Frontline recap with me, Philip Ingram. Now, I present Frontline, but I'm a former senior British military intelligence officer, so I've got a slightly different take on some of the things that my colleagues will question about, and I tend to dig in with some of the answers of the people that I get to interview. But this has been a busy week in what's going on in Ukraine, even though we haven't heard very much, because it tends to have taken a second or third place when it comes to the news after what Donald Trump is doing in Venezuela, what's happening in Iran, and Greenland, and a few other places. Let's get straight into some of the scene setters for this week. And the first one is a clip of Donald Trump talking about Ukraine. Let's have a look at this here.
Would you ever order a mission to go and capture Vladimir Putin?
Well, I don't think it's going to be necessary. I think we're going to have I've always had a great relationship with him. I'm very disappointed. I settled 8 wars. I thought this would be in the middle of the pack, or maybe one of the easier ones. And I don't know if you know, Peter, the last month, they lost 31,000 people, many of them Russian soldiers, and the Russian economy is doing poorly. I think we're going to end up getting it settled. I wish we could have done it quicker, but I didn't give many heat. Europe is a different place. Europe is changing. Europe has got to get its act together. Well, look, Europe has been doing so much for Ukraine, but it hasn't been enough. And obviously that I would say that President Putin is not afraid of Europe. He's afraid of the United States of America, as led by me. There's no fear of Europe. Nobody's seen anything like it. I was called by the leaders of numerous countries. I won't go into which ones, but the biggest.
And this is where Donald Trump is going on and talking about what's happening in Ukraine, talking about the peace talks. But again, once again, he goes back to this line that he seems to say all of the time, that it's Zelensky's fault. We don't know where that's coming from. President Zelensky has bent over backwards to give concessions that can be given to the Russians. It's Vladimir Putin this time around, and every time, who's turned around and refused any part of the peace negotiations or any part of the deal. Why Donald Trump keeps going back to Zelensky, I don't know. Nobody that we've talked to seems to have an understanding. It could be as simple as the fact that he still blames Zelensky for the protection he gave Joe Biden's son. But it could be something simple like that, or could be he just doesn't really understand what it is that's going on here. And that's just a line that's stuck in his mind. But something we'll continue to explore. Of course, with regard to peace negotiations, everything else, President Zelensky's got something to say. Let's listen to what he has to say here.
Будуть заплановані зустрічі наших українських представників в Сполучених Штатах.
In the coming days, meetings between our Ukrainian representatives in the United States will be scheduled. The Ukrainian delegation is currently on its way to the United States. We hope that there will be more clarity regarding the documents that we have already prepared with the American side, as well as Russia's response to all diplomatic work that has been taking place and is still ongoing.
Francouzský prezident Emmanuel Macron a italská premiérka Giorgia Melonová v té poslední době
If everything is finalised, if there is acceptance from the American side, because from our side, in principle, I believe that we are finished, and then it will be possible to sign during Davos.
Stavuje v rámci toho vyjednávání o míru. Jak je vnímáte? Vnímáte jako realistické a jak toho dosáhnout?
The United States wants to end the war tomorrow, and we want to do it today. We are both interested in doing it faster, and we understand that the delay in signing and ending the war is on Russia's side.
Відтермінування, підписання і закінчення війни йдеться з боку Росії.
Українська енергосистема втратила внаслідок цих ударів, і запитання до пана президента Чехії найперше.
На вчора споживання було.
Consumption was high yesterday, somewhere around 18 gigawatts, I think, but we had the capacity of 11-ish. That was the case yesterday, but something is being restored every day.
Bavíme se tady o evropské bezpečnosti, o evropské budoucnosti.
Until this morning, we had several defense systems without missiles. Today, I can speak openly about this because today I have these missiles.
На сьогодні я можу сказати про це відверто, тому що сьогодні у мене є ці ракети.
And President Zelensky is going on and talking about more meetings needed, and it's all about getting the security guarantees. And it's right and proper that he focuses on the need for proper security guarantees, because if we recollect, the Budapest Memorandum had security guarantees from Russia that they were never going to attack, from the United States, the United Kingdom, and others that they were going to protect Ukraine and Ukraine's sovereignty. Well, that didn't happen in 2014, and it didn't happen in 2022, whenever Russia carried out its illegal full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So security guarantees are really important, and they're more than just something on a piece of paper. And this is something that clearly Vladimir Putin doesn't like. And as Donald Trump keeps flip-flopping from not blaming Putin to blaming Zelensky, then President Zelensky is right and proper to have greater skepticism about any promises that come out of Donald Trump's mouth. It's not good for diplomacy. President Trump, if you're watching, you need to be consistent. Right. Let's hope he is watching, because he's going to miss out on some absolutely fantastic interviews this week. As ever, I want you to go and watch all of the interviews because they're all brilliant. We can only take selections from a few, but the first one is from an old friend of the show, Bill Browder, and Bill has got probably one of the best understandings of the psychology behind what makes Russia tick. Have a look at this here.
And so what Putin is hoping for is that even though he's suffering unbelievable casualties, and we're talking about 1,000 men are being killed, 1,000 Russian soldiers are being killed every day. But what he's hoping for is that we are going to tire before he does. And he thinks that because he's living in a dictatorship. In his dictatorship, there's nobody to vote him out. So he can impose the most extreme penalties on his own people. And even if we only experience 1/100th the pain in our democracies and our free media and so on, we're all, tying ourselves up in knots, saying, well, should we be carrying on supporting Ukraine? And that's his big bet, is that we're going to abandon Ukraine before he runs out of resources to continue this war.
And yet the year started with a more muscular America, more aggressive rhetoric, willing to intervene in Venezuela, talk about taking Greenland by force if necessary, and attacking Iran. How do you think this is being viewed inside the Kremlin?
Well, so on one hand, the Kremlin is dancing the jig. They're looking at this and saying, if America wants to take Greenland, why is anyone giving us a hard time about taking Crimea or Ukraine, whatever? That's one argument, one reason for them to celebrate. However, on the other hand, and this is very important, is that the American military operation to take Maduro was a spectacular success militarily for the Americans. To be able to go in, completely immobilize all of their defenses, grab the dictator, the illegitimate dictator of a rogue regime, take him out and not lose a single American life, that looks very powerful compared to Putin, who's been in his special military operation for 4 years and has lost over 1 million soldiers.
And what do you think that US intervention in Venezuela is actually having on Russia's relationships with that country and also with Iran?
Well, what the other downside for Putin is that he has a bunch of what I call client countries or allied relationships. There was Syria, there was Venezuela, there was Iran, and Putin lost Syria. He lost Venezuela as a client state. And we're in the middle of Iran. We don't know which way it's going to go. But if he loses Iran, again, the Americans did all this powerful stuff grabbing Maduro. Putin can't even seem to hold on to any of his allies, any of his client states, and it does make him look weak. It makes America look like a superpower. It makes Russia look like a failing regional power.
And do you think this US willingness to intervene will make other countries any bolder in other areas, for example, targeting Russian oil and its shadow fleet?
Well, it all depends on what Donald Trump is saying privately on phone calls to Keir Starmer or Emmanuel Macron or whatever. In one sense, by him going after the Venezuelan shadow fleet, which happens to also overlap with the Russian shadow fleet, Putin, again, he's being humiliated. On the other hand, we don't hear any announcements of Trump taking over and boarding shadow fleet boats belonging to Russia that have nothing to do with Venezuela. He's doesn't seem to be doing that at all. Now, there is one person who's dealing with the shadow fleet in his own special way, and that's Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. And he is systematically immobilizing these ships as they sail into the Black Sea, and sometimes doing it outside of the Black Sea. And so I think that I think that's probably the most interesting strategy, is not what Keir Starmer or Emmanuel Macron is going to do, but what Zelensky is going to do going after these ships.
And Bill is going on about Putin's plan of trying to deter Europe, and he's focused on trying to maintain sort of divisions within Europe, but also divisions between Europe and the United States. And this could be part of the rationale. We don't know how much manipulation Putin is doing with Donald Trump over Greenland and elsewhere. But US adventurism is really having an impact in a way that, one, it's knocking out Russian allies around the world. So President Maduro in Venezuela, and we see what's happening in Iran and the pressure that's been put on there. These are people that have been backing Putin. But for some reason or other, Donald Trump doesn't seem to be holding Putin to account for providing the support to Maduro with air defenses and with military advisors and other things just before the Americans went in to arrest him. So it's interesting to see what's going on, and Bill explains this in a very, very eloquent way, and I think explains that there's still an awful lot of confusion around as to what the logic is behind things, but that at the end of the day, the person that's beginning to hurt most is Vladimir Putin in all of this. Then we have another fantastic interview, and this is another old friend of the show, Robert Fox. Have a look at this here.
The MOD has been commissioning. There's one medium-range cruise missile, which I was told was called Backstop, but I think it's been given another name. And we've now got the new one of Nightfall, obviously echoes of Skyfall, which is another medium-long range cruise missile. It's for depth attack and air defenses. I think the big question is that I think the seed money is going in, and it's quite striking how quickly the programs are for testing. The shorter range weapon, which it will be a cheap cruise, they want it up and running by April, and they'll be testing around now. A lot of the sea sensors, the kind of equipment that General Gwyn Jenkins is putting into Atlantic Bastion, it's really quite striking again how quickly they've got through the procurement cycle, and they are now in the water. They're now operational. And that's why we have to really ask what is going on at the MOD, that they're commissioning all this stuff, which is good basic technology, and some of it quite cutting edge, to mix the metaphors and epithets, which they're learning, of course, from Ukraine, and they cannot provide it for UK home defences and air defences, or integrated anti-missile, anti-air, anti-drone air defences. And furthermore, absolutely, the stone-faced men and women of the Treasury refuse to fund it.
Indeed. Well, I want to come on to the UK's take on all of this in a little bit, especially John Healey's recent visit to Ukraine. But meanwhile, just recently out of Ukraine itself, they're of course continuing their own strike campaign on Russia, which presumably these missiles will be incorporated into eventually. But they've hit more Russian oil platforms in the Black Sea over the last day or two. Why hit these platforms, do you think, at the moment? And what place do these strikes have in the wider campaign on Russian energy infrastructure? How's that campaign progressing?
I think very, very important. But you could do a certain amount of spot operational analysis and say that this, that, and the other, and the big oil port on the east of the Black Sea has more or less been written down, a lot of it, so much so that Kazakhstan has suspended a lot of its operations, shipping from the Caspian to the Black Sea port. So it is having a big effect. And Kazakhstan, curiously, accounts for 1% of global oil trade, exactly the same amount that, funny enough, Venezuela did. Venezuela, huge resources, the greatest known oil petroleum resources in the world, at over around 305 billion barrels, but only 1% actually of global oil commerce. So how does it all fit together? Yes, it does fit together with Venezuela, Iran. What is going on? It is an orchestrated campaign, particularly against the shadow fleets. It's to shut down Russia and Iran's effectiveness in global oil, because that's where they earn so much of their war revenue, so necessary. And of course, sorry, to spin the wheel even further, who are the biggest market for both shadow fleet oil from Russia and shadow fleet oil from Iran? But China. Yes, I mean, if we ever wanted to underline it again, and it's very interesting how the really big posh papers, I'm talking about internationally, and generally there's something with Times attached to it, if I may put it, the London Times, the New York Times, the LA Times, the Wall Street Journal, are really beginning to wake up, with the two exceptions, the FT and the Economist, that this is a global energy market crisis. And the media is very much in the mix. And it's the medium long term game of Ukraine. And it looks like, again, the appalling military cliche and metaphor, it looks like a genuine Achilles heel for Russia, because this is a way where you can dent. I don't think you're going to destroy, but you can dent the Russian economy through this.
And this is where Robert is talking about the new Nightfall missile. Now, the Nightfall missile is a ballistic missile that is being developed in the United Kingdom to be supplied to Ukraine. And it's symptomatic of a number of different military technologies that the UK is developing to supply to Ukraine. It's no accident that the UK is doing this. It's a way of playing with budgets, and the budget that's allocated to support Ukraine is being used to develop weapon systems that the United Kingdom may want to buy and field itself, and it allows that development cost, that testing cost and everything else to be put against a budget to support Ukraine rather than it coming out of the UK defence budget, which is a clever way of doing things. But it's a capability, as Robert explains, that the Ukrainians need. It's adding another club to the golf bag that is attacking Russian oil and gas infrastructure, Russian manufacturing infrastructure, and giving Ukraine the ability to have a flexible approach to creating the effect that they want in damaging the Russian economy and damaging Russia's ability to continue to manufacture weapon systems for this conflict. And on that, Robert gives a good understanding, good description of how the Nightfall missile will fall into that golf bag of capabilities. With that, he then goes on to explain how Russia is suffering from this crisis in its oil and gas industry, the bit that is underpinning Russia's ability to continue to finance the war, and explains how that pressure will continue over the next year. Russia's still a way off being bankrupted by what's going on, but it's very, very difficult for them to find a solution out of it. And it's going to get more and more painful for them. And this is where accurate missiles, such as the Nightfall, such as Storm Shadow, Scalp, and all the rest of it, which can attack those key components in refineries and in oil and gas storage or pumping facilities and all the rest of it, those key components that Russia cannot easily replace itself, that cannot be replaced because of international sanctions, means that it'll have a greater impact on Russia's ability to continue to fund the war. And Robert, as ever, hits this perfectly and very eloquently. And the final interview I want to point you out this week is one that I did earlier on the week with former US Ambassador William B. Taylor.
Putin's right to be worried. Putin's right to be uncomfortable. Yes, he's gotten weapons and ammunition from the North Koreans. He used to get something from Iran. As you indicate, that's not looking so good for him. He's lost other supporters and other sources of influence in Syria, as you say, and Venezuela. So yeah, Putin's looking isolated. He doesn't have great support from, whereas Ukrainians have continued support from Europeans in particular, but yes, also from the Americans. We're still there, as I say. We won't be there forever, I am sure, and no one wants us there forever. But for now, that support is coming, and that's got to be bothering Putin. That has got to be concerned about Putin as he sees his support fade, and he sees the support for Ukraine continue even increase.
But at the same time, inside Ukraine, we've had the corruption scandal where President Zelensky lost his chief of staff, and he's just promoted General Budanov from the head of the HUR, GUR, to be his new chief of staff. He's moving people around in his intelligence agencies. How much do you think that corruption scandal has hurt Zelensky? And how much do you think his reshuffling that's going on at the minute is going to strengthen his position or otherwise?
Philip, it is interesting. It is interesting. Maybe it's even ironic that the departure of Yermak, the chief of staff, has had the effect of boosting Zelensky and therefore Ukrainian strength, coherence, political support within the country. Andriy Yermak was very capable, very smart, worked very hard, was very loyal, but was very controversial and is gone. And that has enabled, as you just said, General Budanov to come take that place and to focus on part of what Yermak used to do. And now Zelensky is looking to his prime minister, a very good prime minister, to do the domestic part, which is what prime ministers and the cabinet is supposed to do. They're supposed to do, but Andriy Yermak used to do that as well. This is to say that I think Zelensky is delegating more. He's got strong support in his own office now. You've mentioned General Budanov, but there's also Kyslytsya, Ambassador Kyslytsya, who was the ambassador to the UN for Ukraine. He is now the deputy. So they've got a very strong presidential office on the security side, and he is delegating more of the political action, domestic political questions, issues to his prime minister, as he should. So I think on net, President Zelensky is better off. Yes, that corruption is damaging. He's made the right decisions. Zelensky has said the right things about encouraging the investigation, getting rid of ministers who were implicated, cutting ties with a former business associate who I guess now is Israel anyway. So Zelensky is doing the right thing in terms of that investigation. He's he's moving the right people into the right positions that give him more strength. Certainly on the military side, security side, and delegating to the prime minister so she can do her job on the domestic political side.
But and again, we examine, but from a slightly different angle to Bill and Robert touching on, examine the collapse of the Russian allies. The fact that Iran is in the process of collapsing. Russia relies on Iran for a lot of its Shahad drone components, some ballistic missile technology, wider support, oil support, and oil export support. The collapse of the oil revenue that Russia was extracting from Venezuela and the support from Maduro in Venezuela and the impact that that's having. The fact that the United States is now attacking shadow fleet shipping, albeit linked to Venezuela, but it's all linked together: Venezuela, Iran, China, India, and what's going on in Russia, with Russia attacking Ukraine. And this is something that I want you as the wider audience just to bear in mind when we talk about things in Ukraine and talk about things elsewhere. It's not in isolation. We need to start to look at these things from a holistic perspective. So I advise you to go and watch the whole of that interview. It's a good one, but watch the whole of all of our interviews because they're all good this week. And again, once again, thank you for watching. If you want to get exclusive access, please sign up using the link below for membership. And that'll give you early access to our videos and allow you to put Q&A in for me to answer next week or the weeks after. And of course, you can get us on your favorite podcast channel. Just search for Frontline. Thank you. Goodbye.